Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Kennedy Center and the Domingo Cavitz Young Artists preview of two operas, Samson and Delilah and Don Giovanni. We've all been very hard at work at Washington National Opera, as next weekend we open two of the three operas that will form our first triple bill in some years, a mini festival of works that span the many faces of opera today. And on Sunday, March 1st, a week from today, that face is very grand, romantic, and French, with Camille Saint-Saëns's Samson and Delilah. And this is a rare operatic treat. Its vast forces and the demands of its leading roles mean that it is only staged by large companies once every decade or so, and performances are truly destination-worthy events. The score is suitably biblical in scale, full of vast choruses, lush orchestrations, and opulent romantic music. The story, taken from the Bible's Book of Judges, pits the Philistines and the legendary temptress Delilah against the enslaved Hebrews and their general of mythical strength, Samson. And this incredible pageant of color and drama begins with the Philistine governor, Abimelech, taunting the Israelites that their God has abandoned them and that the Philistine god, Dagon, is far more powerful. This doesn't go well for Abimelech, who is slain by the defiant Samson shortly after this aria concludes. And our bass, Sam Weiser, who is actually singing the second Philistine in the show, has graciously agreed to perform Abimelech's aria to give you a flavor of this grand, monolithic, oratorio-like feel of much of the religious parts of the work. At the keys is pianist William Woodard.
Si la voix, encore ces vil troupeaux d'esclaves, osant toujours braver nos lois, et voulant briser les entraves. Cachez vos soupirs et vos pleurs, qui lassent notre patience. Invoquez plutôt la clémence de ceux qui firent vos vainqueurs. C'est Dieu que votre voix implore et demeurez sourd à vos cris. Et vous l'osez prier encore quand il vous livre à nos mépris. Si sa puissance n'est pas vaine, qu'il montre sa divinité, qu'il vienne briser votre chaîne, qu'il vous rende la liberté. Croyez-vous ce Dieu comparable d'Aton, le plus grand des dieux, qui donne son bras redoutable aux guerriers victorieux. Votre divinité créative, tremblante, vient devant lui, comme la colombe plaintive, s'il vautour que la poursuit.
The central role of Delilah is one of the greatest of all mezzo-soprano roles, and the central love duet in Act 2, one of the defining moments in French opera. We have the great American mezzo-soprano Janae Bridges making her house and role debut in the title role, joined by the extraordinary Italian tenor Roberto Aronica, who also makes his debut as Samson. Before that duet begins, Delilah sits on a rock outside her lair in the valley of Sorek, knowing that Samson is already under her spell and will surely come to her that night. She sings this triumphant aria, describing how all his strength is powerless to the might of love, and reminding us all that a man is only as good as his last haircut. To perform Amour vient de ma faiblesse, please welcome mezzo-soprano Amanda Bottoms. You have 6 chances to indulge in this gourmet French operatic splurge, conducted by John Fiore and directed by Peter Cazares, from March 1st to March 21st. But now we turn to the first opera in our triple bill, Mozart and Da Ponte's sublime masterpiece, Don Giovanni. The writer, Gustave Flaubert, said that the 3 finest things God ever created were the sea, Hamlet, and Don Giovanni. Few works of art have ever been more influential or discussed and written about so extensively. Every note of the score shows the clarity, the balance, and the transparency that we associate with Mozart, but it is the raw, emotional power of the work that astonishes. The awesome, indelible horror of the opera's finale is undiminished by the 2¼ centuries since its premiere in Prague in 1787, and the opera's central themes are as relevant today as ever. The opera, often described as a dramma giocoso, is a perfect blend of comedy and serious action. This use of stark contrast, or what artists call chiaroscuro, lends the central characters a disturbing ambiguity. As much as Don Giovanni lies, cheats, abuses, beats, and even rapes and murders the other characters in the show, it is very hard not to find him terrifyingly fascinating. He awakens the Nietzschean Superman in all of us. He gets to act like a god with other mortals simply his playthings. Everyone around him is flawed in their own way. Did Donna really believe that lily-livered Don Ottavio would sneak into her room at night? Why doesn't the commendatore, a figure of justice in the town, insist on arresting Giovanni and putting him to trial, rather than trying to kill him on the spot? Isn't Don Ottavio just taking advantage of Donna's grief to get what he wants? Isn't Leporello just a mercenary coward for not leaving his abusive employer? Surely Elvira is just a crazed, jilted lover who can't handle rejection. How could Zerlina leave Masetto on the altar for another man on their own wedding day, even if Don Giovanni is handsome and rich? And so on. What they all are, with the possible exception of the Don himself and the statue that ultimately drags him down to hell, is deeply human, imprisoned by the mores of their own social class. Now, we're delighted that Our Donna is currently in New York, competing in the semi-finals of the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions. So we begin our preview with the entrance of jilted lover Donna Elvira. Don Giovanni, despite coming right from the probable rape of Donna and the murder of her father, the commendatore, is soon distracted by a pitiful figure swearing vengeance on the lover who has abandoned her. Together with his servant Leporello, they watch her unobserved with growing opportunistic interest. As he sidles up to her to introduce himself, he suddenly recognizes his ex-lover, Donna Elvira, ultimately turning heel and leaving Leporello to make his excuses. To perform the aria Ah, chi mi dice mai, please welcome Marlene Nahas as Donna Elvira, Samuel Weiser as Leporello, and Samson McCready as the Don himself.
Chi mi dice mai
abbandonata.
Farne un retto scempio, gli va a cavare il cor.
Poverina, poverina,
Gli va a cavare il cor, sì, gli va a cavare il cor.
cerchiam di consolare il suo tormento, così ne consolò 1800.
A chi mi dice mai quel barbaro dov'è, che per mio scherno mai, che mi mancò di fe, che mi mancò di fe. Ah, se ritrovo l'empio, e a me non torna ancor, vo farne un retto esempio, gli va a cavare il cor.
Poverina, poverina,
Gli va a cavare il cor, sì, gli va a cavare il cor.
cerchiam di consolare il suo tormento, così ne consolò 1800.
Gli va a cavare il cor, gli va a cavare il cor, gli va a cavare il cor.
Signorina, signorina. Che fai?
So how does Leporello explain his master's behavior to poor Elvira in such a way as to put her off him permanently? Well, he sings her the famous catalogue aria, a continually unfolding list of all of his master's past conquests. 640 in Italy, 231 in Germany, 100 in France, 91 in Turkey, 1,003 in Spain, 2,065 in total. It's pretty good going. Tall or short, plump or skinny, blonde or brunette, rich or poor, young or old, it doesn't matter to him as long as they're wearing a skirt. This aria is actually where the term Leporello fold, meaning a concertina type of bookbinding, comes from. So famous is this particular aria. To take us through this list is again Mr. Samuel Weiser.
Maramina, il catalogo è questo, delle belle che mo' è padron mio, un catalogo è che ho fatt'io. Osservate, leggete con me, osservate, leggete con me. In Italia 640, in Almania 231, 100 in Francia, in Turchia 91, ma in Spagna son già 1.300. 1.300. Van fra questi contadine, cameriere, cittadine, van contesse, baronesse, marchesane, principesse, e van d'ogni grado, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età, d'ogni età. In Italia 640, in Almania 231, 100 in Francia, in Turchia, 91 ma in Spagna son già 1.300. 1.300. Fan queste contadine, cameriere, cittadine, fan contesse, baronesse, marchezzane, principesse, e van doni, grado, doni forma, doni età, doni forma, doni età, doni forma, doni età. Nella bionda, eglia l'usanza, lodar la gentilezza nella bruna la costanza nella bianca la dolcezza vuol d'inverno la grassota vuol d'estate la magrota e la grande maestosa e la grande maestosa la piccina la piccina è un mior vezzosa delle vecchie conquista del piacer di polle in lista sua passion predominante e la giovin principiante non si picca se sia ricca se sia brutta se sia bella se sia ricca brutta se sia bella purché porti la gonnella voi sapete quel che fa voi sapete quel che fa purché porti la gonnella voi sapete quel che fa voi sapete quel che fa voi sapete quel che fa.
So ever since the marriage of Figaro, Mozart had been poking fun at the prevailing class structure in society, which just goes to show how little times have changed since he was alive. So far, we've met aristocrats in Don Anna, Don Elvira, Don Giovanni, Don Ottavio, and the Commendatore, the middle class with Leporello, but now we meet the working class, the farmers and the peasants. It is Zerlina and Masetto's wedding day, but that isn't going to stop Don Giovanni, who takes an immediate liking to the young Zerlina. Abusing his power and privilege as usual, he offers to throw a private, lavish banquet for the party, really just as an excuse to separate Zerlina from her husband-to-be. Masetto quickly realizes something's afoot, but is powerless to stop it, lest he face the Don's sword. First, we will hear William Minot as Masetto bitterly acquiescing to the Don and scolding Zerlina for letting him make a cavalieress out of her. We'll follow that with one of the most familiar and well-known seduction scenes in all of Western art, the duet La ci darem la mano, sung here by Alexandra Novakovsky and Samson McCready. You can just hear Zerlina's resolve cave in the face of the Don's aristocratic charms. Just listen to her wilting, descending chromatics as she says, I don't have any strength anymore, non son più forte, before they skip off together in a peasant dance in triple time.
Chino il capo e me ne vo, già che piace a voi così, altre repliche non fa, non fa. Cavalier voi siete già, dubitar non posso a fe, me lo dice la bontà che volete aver per me. Briconaccia, malandrina, fosse ognor la mia ruina. Vengo, resta, è una cosa molto onesta. Faccia il nostro cavaliere ancora te. Briconaccia, malandrina, fosse ognor la mia ruina. Vengo, resta, è una cosa molto onesta. Faccia il nostro cavaliere ancora te. Faccia il nostro cavaliere ancora te. Faccia il nostro cavaliere ancora te. Cavaliere ancora te.
Non perdiam tempo, in questo istante io ti voglio sposar.
Voi?
Certo io. Quel casinetto è mio, soli saremo, e la gioiello mio, ci sposeremo. La ci darem la mano, mi dirai di sì. Vedi non è lontano, partiamo in mio da qui.
Vorrei e non vorrei, mi trema un poco il cor, felice versarei, ma può burlarmi ancor.
Vieni mio bel diletto,
Mi fa pietà Masetto.
io cangerò tua sorte.
Presto non son più forte, non son più forte.
Vieni, ma ci darem la mano.
Vorrei e non vorrei,
La mi dirai di sì.
mi trema un poco il cor.
Partiamo il mio da qui.
Può burlarmi ancor.
Vieni mio bel diletto, io cangerò tua sorte.
Non son più forte.
Andiamo, mio bene. Andiam, io bene, andiam, ne peni a ristorare d'un innocente amor.
But it really isn't the Don's day. Just when he thinks he's got Zerlina in his clutches, Donna Elvira blazes back in, stopping him in his tracks with this warning. She's on her moral high horse, evident in the elevated Baroque pastiche of A Fugil Traditor, an aria which could quite easily have been written by Handel. After that outburst, we'll hear from Don Ottavio, a little later in the opera, declaring his devotion to Donna. This aria, Dalla sua pace, was actually written about 6 months after the Prague premiere for the first Vienna performances, when Don Ottavio was sung this time by a different tenor, Francesco Morella. It is again a stunning example of Mozart's ability to maintain that central ambiguity in the piece, at once a deep and sublime expression of love and devotion, and simultaneously a depiction of Don Ottavio's inaction and blandness. Please welcome back as Donna Elvira, soprano Marlene Nahas, and then as Don Ottavio, tenor Matthew Pierce.
Non lasciar più dir, e la premenditor fallate Giglio. Da miei tormenti impara a credere a quel cor e nascere tutti mar dal mio periglio. Ah, fuggi, fuggi, ah, fuggi, traditor, non lasciar più dir, e la premente torre fallate Giglio, e la premente torre fallate Giglio, sì, fallate Giglio.
Dalla sua pace la mia dipende, quel che a lei piace, vita mi rende, quel che lei incresce, morte mi dà. Morte mi dà. Se la sospira, sospiro anch'io, quell'ira, quel pianto è mio e non ho bene, se la non l'hai, non ho bene. Se la
che a lei piace, vita mi rende, quel che la incresce, morte mi dà.
Now let's catch up with Zerlina and Masetto, who is understandably devastated that his bride-to-be would abandon him on their wedding day. Here she is, convincing him that she's still his little lamb. She sings in his key of F major, in simple, reassuring folk music with repeated, caressing vocal gestures, accompanied by a solo obbligato cello to give her music a rustic, earthy, wholesome sound. Of course, the Don isn't far away, and he still manages to persuade them to come to his castle for a party, but this time he lets Masetto come along. In the brilliant Act 1 finale, Mozart has 3 dancers performed simultaneously, with 2 on-stage instrumental groups at either side of the stage, and then a third in the orchestra pit. An aristocratic minuet in slow 3 time, a middle-class contradance in duple time, and a peasant jig in triple meter. And in that musical confusion, the Don manages to drag Zerlina off to his bedchambers, and it's only her screams that alert everyone else. Still, the Don manages to get out of it by blaming it all on Leporello, and the act ends in confusion. To sing the aria Batti Batti as Zerlina, please welcome back Alexandra Novakovsky.
Ma se colpa io non ho, ma se da lui ingannato rimasi, e poi che temi, tranquillo di mia vita, non mi toccò la punta delle dita, non me lo credi, ingrato, vien qui, sfogati, ammazzami, fa tutto di me quel che ti piace. Ma poi, Masetto mio, ma poi fa pace. Batti, batti, oh bel Masetto, la tua povera Zerlina, starò qui come la nemmina, le tue botte ad aspettare. Batti, batti, la tua Zerlina, starò qui, le tue botte ad aspettare. Lascerò staziarmi le crine, lascerò calmarmi gli occhi e le capre tremoli, e lieto poi saprò baciar, Batti, batti, oh bel Masetto, agnellina, le tue botte io ospitar. Oh, Masetto, batti, batti, starò qui, le tue botte ad aspettar. Non vedo, non hai cuore, non hai cuore, io lo vedo, non hai cuore. Pace, pace, vita mia, pace, pace, vita mia, incontente d'allegria, notte che vogliam passar, notte che vogliam passar, notte che vogliam passar, notte che vogliam passar. Pace, pace, vita mia, pace, pace, vita mia, incontenti d'allegria, notte di vogliam passar. Sì, notte di vogliam passar. Sì, notte di vogliam passar. Vogliam passar. Vogliam passar.
Don Giovanni himself is the only main character who is never given an aria of introspection and self-examination. His short arias are all about outward action, which of course is perfectly in keeping with his personality. He isn't given to self-reflection. He simply takes what he wants from those around him. Here he is again in seduction mode, this time singing a serenade up to Donna Elvira's window to persuade her to come out and meet him. In reality, so he can sneak in and have his way with her chambermaid. Mozart again turns to musical special effects here, a solo mandolin and the entire string section plucking their strings like a big guitar, making for a spookily eerie serenade. Poor Elvira has really had a rough time of it, and finally she admits to herself that no matter how terrible Giovanni is, how awful his actions, how surely she senses fate catching up with him, she still just can't get over him. She's consumed by pity even when she's hell-bent on vengeance. She's doomed to be unhappy because of him. All that internal conflict is brilliantly conveyed in the astonishing accompanied recitative, one of Mozart's most unique creations, that precedes the aria Mi tradì quell'alma ingrata, here sung again by Marlene Nahas. But first, please welcome back as the Don, Samson Macready, in De Vieni alla finestra.
Tesoro, vieni a
che il zucchero porti in mezzo al cuore. Non esser gioia mia con me crudele, lasciati almen veder mio bell'amore.
In quali cessi, o nome, in quali misfatti orribili, tremendi, mi ha voluto il sciagurato. Oh no, non pote tardar l'ira del cielo, la giustizia tardar. Sentir già darmi la fatale saetta che li piomba sul gamo. Per dove già il baratro mortal. Misera Elvira, che contrasto d'affetti in senti nasce. Perché questi sospiri? E questi ambaci mi tradii quell'alma ingrata, quell'alma ingrata. E infelici, oh Dio mi fa, infelici, oh Dio mi fa, infelici, oh Dio mi fa. Ma tradita e abbandonata
Well, things finally start to catch up with the Don. Actions have consequences, here on an eternal scale. The opera becomes steadily more sinister, and here, in a graveyard at night, things take a very disturbing turn. Thanks to the magic of opera, despite it being only about 16 hours since his murder, the ornate tomb and marble statue of the Commendatore now looms in the background, as Leporello catches up with the Don in the graveyard at around 2 o'clock in the morning. As they laugh and carry on, recounting the events of the day, suddenly a booming voice is heard saying, "You will cease laughing before dawn." Leporello is sure it's coming from the statue and cowers in terror. Giovanni, defiant to the bitter end, tells his servant to invite the statue to dinner that night in the duet or statua gentilissima. Poor terrified Leporello eventually does, and the statue responds with a nod of its head and a final resolute yes or si. The statue will indeed come to dinner in apocalyptic music, the likes of which the world had never heard before. Don Giovanni runs February 29th through March 22nd with a wonderful cast conducted by Washington National Opera principal conductor Evan Rochester and directed by Lauren Meeker. You can buy tickets for all 3 operas in our triple bill across the hall in the box office or online through the Kennedy Center's website. And I hope you'll join us next Sunday at this time for a preview of the 3rd piece in Washington National Opera's triple bill, Janine Tesori and Haswell Thompson's very important contemporary opera, Blue. And now, to close our program, please welcome back Samson McCready as the Don, Samuel Weiser as Leporello, and William Minot, appropriately, as the imposing statue of the Commendatore, in the trio or statua gentilissima.
O statua gentilissima del gran Commendatore, patron, mi preme il cuore, non posso terminare.
Finiscila, o nel petto, ti metto questo acciar.
Dimmi ciò che capriccio,
Che gusto, che spassetto,
io sento micelar,
lo voglio far
io
piacere,
sento,
lo voglio far primar.
O statua gentilissima, benché di marmo siate, a padron mio, mirate, che seguita a cantar,
Ori,
no, attendete, signor, il padron mio, parate ben, non io, vorria con voi cenar. Che scena è questa? Che scena è questa? O ciel, chi la testa?
Voilà che sei un buffone, voilà che sei un buffone, sei un buffone.
Guardate il compatrone,
E che c'è più guardar.
con la marmorea testa, e fa così, con la marmorea testa, e fa così.
Guardate,
Se potrete,
verrete a cena.
si muove mover mi posso appena
in vera scena
te
la buon vecchio la scena
guarda
a preparare andiamo partiamo via di qua
per carità
salva in vera scena
per carità partiamo andiamo via di qua andiamo via di qua andiamo via di qua di qua
Thank you for joining us at Millennium Stage. As we prepare for another performance,